Hey, how are you doing? This is Dr. Joseph Capps coming back to you again with another video for our podcast, Dancing with the Darkness. Today, I want to talk about something that is absolutely 100% something that you're going to experience with CPTSD. As you know, this podcast is a raw, unfiltered account of my 50 years of life and surviving and learning how to even thrive with pretty severe CPTSD and a lot of polytrauma. Do us a favor. Before you start watching this video, it would help us a whole lot if you like and subscribe to the channel. And you can also subscribe to the podcast itself on Spotify or Podbean. Helps us a lot, and we're just trying to get the word out. There's people out there that are suffering, and our whole purpose of these videos and our podcast is to try to help those mitigate their suffering. Anything that I can do, say, or teach on this channel that's going to help people not have to live with these things in a way that's detrimental, and instead find ways to improve their life and make their symptoms and the issues that come up with CPTSD become something positive, because we can absolutely turn our pain into purpose. So emotional flashbacks is such a huge part of CPTSD. There's absolutely no way we're going to be able to talk about this in one podcast. It's going to take several. And in particular, we're going to go through towards the end of these podcasts with some things that you need to learn to do to cope with these emotional flashbacks. Things that are going to be in your toolbox that are going to be absolutely crucial to you starting to process and to start overcoming these emotional flashbacks and managing them in a healthy way, because they are going to happen. And we use the analogy of an onion and all the layers of the onion because it really is appropriate. And some of us have had a lot of polytrauma, not just from early childhood stage, but all through life. And so all of this layers on. And so sometimes emotional flashbacks may even have poly memories and poly instances that come into it. Okay, and this is not something that's talked about a lot. I mean, I've been researching this and studying this and working on my own healing for over 20 years. And we talk about CPTSD, but it just does not get the attention. It does not get the research. It does not get the amount of efforts that PTSD has. And obviously it's because PTSD really got into the spotlight finally, unfortunately, because of over 20 years of war that we've endured. And I'm thankful for that, because there's a silver lining there that people are getting help, thank God. But CPTSD has been around forever. This is a generational curse. This is something that continues to go through genetics and through families, and it's just awful. Sometimes I've even thought, when Jesus was about to be crucified, Pontius Pilate told the crowd that his blood was on their hands, and they shouted back and they said, "We take this on us and our generations." And so I can't help but wonder if that's one of the things that they took on that day in our history, was the sins of the father would go down to the children, and it would continue on. And much of this has to do with the epidemic and the crisis of childhood abuse. The same abuse that is happening now was happening back hundreds of years ago. So this is a continual thing. It's generational. And it's a disease almost, and it just continues on. And so with the form that I use, I like to share things that are happening in my life. I like to share my truth and to show you what it looks like from my point of view. And so I'm going to give you some powerful examples of what's happened this past week in my life, and what I've had to do to mitigate that, and what I've had to do to work through that and to survive that. And first, I want to do a little bit of psychoeducation with you. And what I want to talk about is something that's even more rare. We have a very hard time talking about CPTSD. We have the developmental stage that is getting a lot more attention. Okay, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, thank God for him. He has come up with developmental trauma disorder, and SAMHSA and NCTSN and all these organizations that are looking at childhood trauma and the impact it has. But we're not looking at what happens when you have all of this trauma as a child and then you go through life and continue to have trauma. And this is very common because we've gone over this in past videos. We have low self-worth, low self-esteem. We are not healed. We have an inner critic that just won't be quiet. We beat ourselves up. We never feel like we're good enough. We overachieve. And so what that does is it creates a continual toxic environment for us, because the people we choose to get into relationships with are not healthy. And so that breeds that. We allow ourselves to be victims or to be abused or taken advantage of at work, by friends, by relationships. And so we absolutely are part of the problem because we don't have the ability to fight back. We don't know how to. But also we end up putting ourselves in positions and end up in positions where other people continue to abuse us. And so this ends up being a very difficult thing as we go on in life, because we get up in years and we get to a point where there's no room left in the inn. I like saying that. When we were talking about Christ's birth, and there was no room at the end and he had to go to a manger. Well, there's no room up here or in your body anymore. And so we start seeing emotional flooding, emotional dysregulation. We start seeing a lot of things happening later in life that we don't understand. And it's causing physiological problems. It's causing inflammation. And so it's all related. Okay, we see people between 40s and 60s at higher risk for heart attack and stroke and things like that. Well, it's not just because of your age. It's because of inflammation, and it's because of all of this stress that's been keeping you going, really, because you're literally running off of adrenaline, you're running off the fight or flight, you're running off the sympathetic nervous system. And, sometimes we can thrive. That's why we talk about the paladin community and the first responder community and military, because a lot of times we thrive in that high stress environment because we're used to it. But eventually it does take its toll and it wears you out and you're not going to be able to handle it anymore. Okay, so one of the things that happens are what's called emotional flashbacks. Okay, now this is not the same as a flashback that they talk about with PTSD, to where there is a reoccurrence or a re-experiencing. We decided that we're going to call it a re-experiencing and not a trigger. We talked about that last video. And this is a sense of deja vu. It feels like you're in the situation again. And we have a huge physical reaction. And so this is not quite the same as an emotional flashback. Okay, an emotional flashback is when it takes us back to childhood and the intense, overwhelming feeling states that we had as a child, and it comes back the same way. It's not the same as a PTSD flashback of a traumatic event. This is literally our childhood coming back, and we literally are responding to this as a child. And so we need to understand the difference. Okay, number one, this is going to be 100% an amygdala hijack, which we've talked about. Okay, so this emotional flashback is not based on cortex, cognitive anxiety, where we're having rigid thoughts and feelings and beliefs that make us feel a certain way. This is literally a powerful re-experiencing that is affecting us emotionally. That's why we call it an emotional flashback, because it's literally taking us back to that childhood moment where we were feeling helpless, we were feeling uncared for, we were feeling completely alone, and we were yearning for nurturing, and we were yearning for support, and we were yearning for some sort of love from someone, and we weren't getting it. Okay, and so this is an overwhelming state sometimes. Okay, this is what we would call a disturbing regression, because we are literally regressing. Okay. And, we've heard comments before, especially in the recovery community. We talk about how, we don't want to erase years of recovery by falling off the wagon and having a drink or doing a drug. Okay. Well, this unfortunately is like that. If we don't learn how to manage these things, and we don't learn how to use the meaningful part of our brain, the cognitive part of our brain, to counteract this amygdala hijack, it can absolutely regress us. And so, last video we talked about some of the childhood nurturing and coping strategies that we had. And a lot of times after these emotional flashbacks that we have, we will see those behaviors come back. For me, it's rocking or fidgeting or rocking myself to sleep at night, holding myself at night, lots of things that I subconsciously do when these emotional flashbacks come back. And it's compounded when you don't really have any support or any kind of understanding or nurturing or something like that. Now, you can go and there's people that will charge $150 to $200 an hour, and you can pay them to show you compassion and empathy, but the point is that I'm not a fan of therapy when it's like that. I want to see therapy with a practitioner, like I try to be, where there really is genuine compassion and empathy, and it's not just because thanks for your payment and now it's on to the next client. These are the things that I work really hard to give my clients, because I know that it's what I really needed to get me on the right track. Okay. And so these intensely disturbing regressions, okay, or amygdala hijackings, it's an overwhelming feeling of stress. And it's not an adult feeling of stress, like I'm saying. It's literally taking you back to that innocence, to that helplessness that you felt as a child, where you had no way to defend yourself. You had no way to fight back. You had no way to not have abandonment. Okay, so this has to do with abandonment. It has to do with a lack of nurturing. And then it has to do with the experience as well. So it's very, very powerful. When we get stuck in these flashbacks, this is where fear comes in again, shame comes in again, and also we can have some pretty deep depression. Okay, I see a lot of folks get diagnosed literally with dysthemic depression, like deep, deep depression, and really it's not an accurate diagnosis. The depression is literally a symptom of the CPTSD. It's a symptom of the underlying cause, which a lot of times are chronic emotional flashbacks. Okay, so this can be so powerful that it can completely dominate your experience. Okay, you're gonna feel little. You're gonna feel fragile. You're gonna feel helpless. Everything feels just too hard. It just feels like you just want to give up. Like you just wave the white flag, and it's like, man, you know what? I just can't deal with this anymore. The weight of life is already coming crashing down. The weight of life is already wearing me down. I'm already carrying so much just in regular life. This is just too much. And you feel excruciatingly vulnerable. Excruciatingly vulnerable. And this is one of the things with CPTSD and PTSD. We do not like to feel vulnerable at all. We need to be in control. We need to be tough and strong and ready to fight, and nothing can get through these walls that I've built, okay? But this is a time when you feel really vulnerable. Like you just can't win. You just can't beat this unseen force that's coming after you. Life is just too scary at this moment, okay? And it doesn't matter how tough you are. I've seen the biggest, baddest warriors on this planet be crushed by this. Crushed. Guys that have done things and women that have done things that you can't even fathom what they've done as far as mental toughness and physical toughness. You can't even imagine what they've done. But yet, these emotional flashbacks from childhood, they break you down into an extremely vulnerable state, and you end up regressing into that childhood state, and you literally are helpless. Okay, and I really do believe that this is when we see a lot of people terminate their lives. I really do believe this. We're looking in the right places, but we're not. We need to look a little deeper, because these emotional flashbacks, depending on the childhood trauma, this is absolutely powerful enough, unfortunately, to get you to that point of hopelessness and that point of vulnerability that you just can't do it anymore. Okay? That it is better to lose the dance to the darkness and give up and give in. Okay? With that note, if you're watching this, I want you to know that it's never too much, because God knows everything. If you're not a person of faith, I can't force you to do that, but I can tell you that it is 100% what has saved me and continues to save me every single day, because I cannot dance with the darkness. I cannot lead that dance without supernatural help from my God. Okay? Because like we said in the last video, CPTSD is a lifetime commitment. Okay? No matter how much healing you do, no matter how much you do, we are still going to be at risk for emotional flashbacks and regression and things that were repressed. Okay? And so the best we can do is to have all of the tools in our toolbox to manage it, to put ourselves in a position to where we're helping other people with our experiences. And first and foremost, knowing that there is a supreme being that crafted us in the womb of our mother and knows everything. He knows every cell in our body. And he's the one who can get us through this. And he has a purpose for it. Okay? Your battery's feeling dead. You're feeling like life is just too much. Sometimes in the worst emotional flashbacks, it almost feels like there's an apocalypse happening to you. Okay? I want you to understand, if you're watching this video, I understand. I intimately understand. And I'm going to give you some examples. This is not something I have to search my memory banks for, because I live with this. And so you'll know that I'm genuine in this video, because these are things that happen to me every day. And so the past couple videos I've mentioned, what's going on with my elderly father and the things that's brought up and the stressors that's brought up. And so this week I was having to go over to the assisted living facility. I had to go over there as his power of attorney, and I had to write a check for his first month's installment. I had to look at his room. I had to figure out how we were going to get his stuff in his room, what we could fit, what we couldn't fit. And so I want to give you some ideas of how these emotional flashbacks happen. So I've already got the stress of dealing with this. I've got all of the memories that have come up about my father. I'm facing the fact that he is not this big, bad, oppressive man anymore, but he's literally regressing to a point where he needs help, and he's vulnerable, and he's not in charge anymore. Okay? Now, mentally, he's still there, and he can still be nasty, because he's been nasty this week, and I've had to compartmentalize that and have some give him some grace and understand that he's got his own fear, his own anxiety. He's dealing with his own stuff, because he's gone from being independent and taking care of himself, and now he's in a vulnerable state, and he's at the mercy of other people. Plus, it's an upheaval in his life, because he's going once again from living in his own place and having a car and doing what he wants to do, and now he's literally going into a facility where he has to be cared for, and he's losing his ability to be independent. He's losing his ability to drive his car and to have his home and all of these things. Okay, so I'm giving him some grace, but at the same time, I'm not going to lie on this video and say that that nastiness and that attitude and that oppressiveness and, him, this expectancy that, I'm going to be that same frightened kid that would come home and you're going to give me all of these things to do and it's just expected. And if you don't do it, there's going to be hell on earth for you. Okay. This is where you have to draw the line with these emotional flashbacks and you have to say, hey, you know what? This is an emotional flashback. It's not happening to me right now. The entities that hurt me before can't hurt me now. And that's going to be the first technique that you're going to learn with these emotional flashbacks. And as we do further videos, I'm going to give you some more. But as I was saying, it's way too much for one video. So let's talk about something before we close the video out. I want to talk about something that we never talk about. What if your emotional flashback has layers? Okay? We cannot define an emotional flashback like we do a regular flashback, that it's one thing, okay? And I'm going to give you an example. So I'm going to this facility, okay? Well, what are the chances that my app on my phone is going to take me in a direction that is going to cause me some severe emotional flashbacks, okay? So the first one is I happen to pass the apartments that I lived in until the age of 6, where some pretty severe trauma happened, okay? So I immediately have a physiological reaction, a deja vu, hair raising up on my neck, hands shaking when I pass these apartments. And so I'm trying to talk myself down out of that. I'm like, oh yeah, that sucks. I don't want to think about that right now. I've got things to do. So I'm trying to manage this, okay? So then I come up and I make a turn, and now I pass the pediatrician's building, which is a very unique building. This building had its own look, okay? There's only one building that looks like this building. And so I have very, very negative memories and very, very scary, traumatic memories of this pediatrician's office because bad things happened to me there with allergy shots and testing and all of these things, okay? So once again, more emotional flashback happening. So I haven't even gotten over passing the apartments, and now I'm having to deal with that, okay? And it keeps going. Now I pass the building that was the ABC store that my mother would get all her booze from. And I remember being in the car, going there, her getting her booze, her driving drunk, the whole 9 yards. So we've got the apartments, we've got the pediatrician's office, and then we've got the ABC store, okay? Boom, 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 all in a row, okay? Because it took me back to my old neighborhood in Lakeside where I grew up, and here we go. And I'm like, oh, this is great, okay? It wasn't something that I planned to do. It's not like, hey, let's go take a trip down memory lane and let's go process some trauma. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was unintentional, okay? And the fact that I'm already in an anxious state. I'm already in an emotional state because I'm having to go do this very uncomfortable thing, okay? And so I'm not on here asking for pity. I'm not on here asking you to feel sorry for me. I'm trying to help you understand that I get it, okay? And I want you to know what it looks like, okay? So now we have layers to this emotional flashback, okay? So I've got to talk myself down. I've got to get to this place. I've got to sit in my car for a minute. I've got to do my diaphragmatic breathing that I told you that you need to do. I've got to do some positive self-talk. And then I've got to pull out some mental and physical toughness that I know lives there because I got to go in here and do this thing. I don't have time for this. So I push it back. I go in there. I make it through all of the forms I got to fill out. I make it through looking at his room, measuring it with a tape measure, taking pictures, absorbing the sights, the smells, all of the olfactory things, realizing that this is a done deal. In a couple days, he's going to be here, and this is going to be it. And then also looking at all of the other tasks that I have ahead of me. Okay, I've still got to move him in, which we did. I've still got to take his car back and deal with that nightmare. I've still got to clear his place out. I've still got to sell his place. So it's not over by a long shot. And during that time, I know that he's going to have his own fear and his own anxiety and his own emotions. And what do? We lash out, right? And so he's going to lash out. And I know that I'm going to get criticized. I know that I'm going to get yelled at. I know that there's going to be a lot of emotions during this whole process. And so I have to prepare for that. I have to prep for that, and I have to be ready for that. Okay? And so I want to end this by telling you sometimes what we need to do. Okay? Not to mention, we were having this horrible monsoon freaking storm. It was so bad that they were letting kids out of school early. We have this once in a lifetime mega rain freaking storm in the middle of March, in the beginning of March. Crazy, right? So everything's flooded. I'm driving through this nightmare. Having to go 35 miles an hour on the interstate. Okay, so there's just a lot, right? There's a lot coming crashing down. And so I got into my car and I sat there for a minute and I let the emotions come. Okay? I realized I'm safe. Nobody's around. It's pouring down rain. Nobody can see what I'm doing in my car. And I breathed and I allowed the emotions to come. And sometimes we just have to do that, okay? And I'm not a weak man, and I'm not a sissy. I'm a pretty tough guy. You can ask anybody. I have a very high threshold for pain. I go through a lot. So this doesn't mean you're weak whatsoever. But I sat in my car and I wept. Because I needed to. I needed a release. And so I allowed myself to deal with the emotions, a mixture of grief, a mixture of past fear, a mixture of past hurts, regrets, whatever, okay? We can still grieve our childhood at 50 years old, okay? We can still grieve these things, okay? We go through this stage psychologically where these things happen, generativity versus stagnation, and we look back and sometimes it's not a happy thing. It's not something that we're proud of. It's not something that we look back on and we're like, oh yeah, everything's been so great. I've lived such a great life. It's not always going to be that way. And so I allowed myself to deal with these emotions and I wept and I did it until I was done. And then I got my crap back together and I did a little bit of processing and did some rational thinking. And I said, this is the way that it is. And then I started looking at all the positives, thankful that I found a place in such a short notice. It's a good place. It's a caring staff. They're going to take good care of him. And so I looked at all of the positives. I looked at the fact that I was able, as an abused child, to come back as an adult and do the right thing for my father and to honor him like I should, the way that God commands, no matter what I went through as a child. And so I had to give myself a little bit of affirmation and say, you know what? You're a pretty good guy. And what you're doing is difficult, and having hopes that God sees that and that he's going to bless me for it. We always hope that the mistakes or the sin that we've done in the past can, it's already forgiven, but I always hope that it can be undone by the good that we do in the true nature of our heart. I have that faith. And so I wanted to give you some powerful examples of what I have to do, okay? What I have to do to get over these things in a healthy way. What I continue to do every single day. I'm not going to tell anyone on here to do something that I don't do, that I don't know that works 100%. You can read all day long in books and articles and different things, but that does not mean that that specific thing is going to work for you. And you also need to be aware that a lot of times these emotional flashbacks do not come in a nice little tidy box, a nice little container with a bow that you can unwrap delicately and take the prize out. Sometimes they come from all directions, and we have to be prepared for that. And we need to tap into that strength that God gave us, and we also need to tap into his strength. It helps a tremendous amount. If you're in a position to have support, if you're in a position to where God has put people in your life that are willing to listen, that are willing to walk with you through these things, please take advantage of it. This is not the time to be tough. This is not the time to be independent and I've got this, I can do it on my own. If God has blessed you with those caring and empathic individuals in your life, you've got to tap into that. It doesn't make you weak, okay? Not only is it a gift from God to you, but it's also a gift to the person that is helping you, because oftentimes that is what fulfills them. That is what gives them purpose. That is what gives them affirmation and keeps them going. And I'm one of those people, so I know. I get my high and my endorphins off of helping other people. And so that's why we do these videos. If there's one of you out there today that this video touched, please give me a comment. Let me know. That is actually fuel for my soul, and it keeps me going, because that's the only reason that we're here. I want you to know that no matter how powerful these experiences are, no matter how bad you feel, no matter how crushing it feels and how helpless you feel, it is never too much, because God promises us that He will never give us more than we can handle. I want to thank you for listening. Once again, if this video touched you, if it spoke to you, please comment, like, and subscribe to our channel and to our podcast. And we're hoping to get this out to as many people as we can. And I hope that it helps someone today. Until next time, God bless, and we'll see you next time.